Welcome to another Combat Mission Battle for Normandy video. Today we're taking a look at the German side of Round 2 of the Utah Beach Tournament. In this scenario, the remnants of a German company at around 40% strength are defending a rail station at the outskirts of a town. In addition to the infantry, the Germans also have 3 Stugs and a pair of off-map 81mm mortars with 5 target reference points to aid in the defense. The attacking American force is known to be armour-heavy. In this case, since I played the game as the Americans as well, I know they have 10 Shermans but very limited infantry. The objectives for the Germans are to hold the road junction, which immediately feels like an impossible task, as well as the town access, which is a bit more achievable. However, the actual objective mostly sits under the outermost buildings, exposing them to enemy fire. The Americans will be attacking through the fields and hedges, so I've decided to set my initial positions with a small force in the buildings adjacent to the fields. I know they aren't going to hold the attack back, but I want them there to spot where the enemy is coming from so I can adjust my deeper positions if needed. The majority of my forces will be farther back on the opposite side of the tracks, where I hope I can put fire on the Americans as they come out into the open to cross the tracks themselves. Since the American force is so armor-heavy, my AT assets will be very important in the battle. I've set up a pair of Panzerschrecks, watching one of the roads out of the fields with the hope that they can score an early ambush and cause traffic issues on the road. A third Panzerschreck is watching the open area across the tracks. My Stugs are set up in either keyhole or positions that are protected from the sides, with fields of fire that should be able to catch Shermans as they exit the fields. I've spread my target reference points around groups of buildings I expect the Americans may occupy, and I placed my single tile of anti-tank mines at the town access itself. I feel like success in this scenario is going to rely heavily on how well the Stugs trade against the Shermans. Let's see how it goes. Now, turn 1 starts off with a bunch of action, as my opponent has immediately moved up Shermans and opened fire on pretty much every building he can see with them. Unfortunately, one of those buildings is over on the right where I had a Panzerschreck set up. He correctly predicts that there is something there and blasts it to pieces with a couple tank shells. So there's one of my 3 Panzerschreck teams gone already in turn 1. But other than that, I don't really take any losses, so while that is a little bit painful, at least I don't take more casualties. The Sherman that took out one Panzerschreck team is now slowly rolling up the road, and this is exactly where I was hoping to be able to ambush it. However, you can probably notice that my Panzerschreck team is facing the wrong direction. They're actually looking out the window towards my forces instead of towards the Sherman, so they are not going to spot it and not going to be able to shoot at it. I probably should have checked to make sure they were looking in the right direction. And one of my Stugs in the middle is eagerly awaiting the opportunity to fire at some Shermans. More action kicks off in turn 3, with one of my squads getting spotted and taken down by a Sherman shell. That Panzerschreck still have not realized it's facing the wrong way, so I haven't ordered it to move to the other side. However, the South squad that is sharing the building with it is rapidly getting taken down by 2 different Shermans firing on them. I believe the Panzerschreck did lose a man due to some shrapnel, so it's just one guy left in there. My troops that are set up in the train station, I do have a MG42 with tripod. They start to spot some American infantry as they are moving up through the fields. And just the view from the machine gun as they start to open fire into the hedges that they've now seen the Americans moving up into. And I do get a couple kills, which is fantastic, because I know the Americans do have a very small infantry force. My Stug in another keyhole position, I've noticed infantry have crept into the outermost building, so the Stug is going to start opening fire on the next building over, hoping that the infantry is moved in and they can get a couple kills in. As expected, my first line of defense is not holding very long at all. I believe the Panzerschreck just got wiped out over on the right-hand side there. I've got another small team of infantry that are valiantly firing into the Americans in the hedges, but they're not really having a whole lot of effect, and it's only a matter of time before the couple Shermans in behind catch sight of them and finish them off. But the wider view of turn 4, Americans are pushing pretty much everywhere along the line of contact. Shermans do pack a lot of high explosive shells, and there are a lot of Shermans on the field, so they are going to do a fantastic job of exactly what you just saw there, knocking down any buildings that they may think my infantry may be hiding in. And this is definitely going to be a theme that is going to repeat itself many times throughout this battle, as any position that could harbor Germans is going to get hammered by high explosive shells until it is removed from the field. Overall, a very effective tactic if you have enough ammunition to support it. And as expected, a Sherman is going to advance on my small team that was firing at the infantry through the hedges and start putting some shells into the building. It doesn't take long before they're going to start taking some casualties from the shrapnel coming through. There were a few teams that had Panzerfausts, but it appears this was not one of them. One of my Stugs is going to reposition a little bit since there appear to be a fair amount of American tanks coming, and he just drives himself right into a crater. This was a moment of sheer panic as my tank appears to be completely stuck face down in a crater. However, he does manage to get his traction back and take up the position I had wanted it in to cover the road since both my Panzerschrecks are down. Apologies for the sound in the next couple turns. Same issue as the American game. I was playing around with some settings and somehow managed to get a couple turns where I don't have any game audio coming through. In a moment of extreme indecisiveness, I've now decided to move the Stug back to where it was. I was trying to be careful not to drive it into craters again this time, but the pathfinding is not always fantastic, and it is going to drive itself into yet another crater. With the onslaught of Shermans coming through, I've also decided that it makes much more sense to move my troops out of the train station and get them into some better positions farther back. So they are also going to start running. You can see on the left, I've got my machine gun team that was firing into the hedges, relocating, and also a couple squads that were in the train station itself have now fallen back, and my Stug makes its way back around to where it initially was. Back over towards the road junction, my opponent is starting to make a push into the buildings, got some infantry that moved up into the hedge, and a Sherman is working to suppress where he thinks my troops may be, and I believe he's already killed the squad that was in that building, but I do have a light machine gun and an HQ still tucked away and hiding. The advance of the Americans seems to have slowed down a little bit for a turn or two here as the Shermans are getting to peek out of the hedges for the first time, and they're starting to engage some of my deeper positions. My Stug near the train station does make a couple attempts to hit some of the infantry over by the road junction, but misses. Looks like a Sherman may fire a shot back, but also misses. My machine gun in the building kind of front and center there starts to fire over at some enemy infantry to the far right, which does reveal its location, and a couple Shermans start pummeling the building, causing a couple casualties. And my Stug in a keyhole position gets its wheel shot and starts to retreat. The sound has returned, and the first thing we get to hear is the glorious sound of 81mm mortars coming down. One of my strikes, I've targeted around the target reference point near the road junction, and I'm just blasting that entire area with as many shells as I can on a heavy bombardment to try and kill the infantry, since I've seen quite a few of them in that general area. My Stugs are getting in on the action there, starting to fire their cannons into a few buildings that they've seen infantry in as well. Over in the middle, right on the road junction itself, wiping out a squad. So the Stug that was between the two buildings next to the train station, it took some machine gun fire into its treads and decided to reverse out, and I haven't put it back in its spot yet. I'm just letting it sit where it is to see if it can get any targets more towards the opposite side. The barrage has come to an end, and I move my Stug next to the train station forward a little bit to try and engage a pair of Shermans that it might possibly be able to see. An American bazooka tries to take a run at a Stug in the side armor there, but falls quite a bit short. That was a little bit of a scary moment. Unfortunately, my Stug next to the train station gets spotted first and is going to get bailed out on the very first hit, killing most of the crew. The Shermans are going to continue to pummel its empty hull for a little bit there. However, my Stug is returning to its keyhole between the two buildings next to the bridge, and it makes the spot on a Sherman and starts firing some shells in its direction. Fortunately, the first one misses, but it is going to get on target with the second, getting a penetration into the front of the turret. Doesn't know if the Sherman is dead yet, so it's going to put another shell into it, getting yet another penetration into the front hull. And the Stug advances yet again. A return shot from a Sherman drops the building that's next to it, but it does put a third shell into that same Sherman for yet another penetration, and this time it looks like it's confirmed the kill. However, the Sherman next to that one is going to continue to fire at the Stug, which causes the crew to throw it into reverse, and unfortunately they're just going to reverse right into the line of sight of multiple other Shermans and take a penetration in the side armor. So I need to trade well with my Stugs. I've now traded 2 Stugs for 1 Sherman, not the ratio I need. At this point, I am now down to 1 Stug, and it only has to kill 9 Shermans in order to win this one for me. So it's got a lot of work ahead of it. As you can see from the map here, I've lost my entire kind of initial perimeter there, so I'm starting to lose sight of where the Americans are coming from, except I can hear all sorts of Shermans coming my direction, mostly through the middle. So I'm hoping this last Stug can get an angle on them as they try to come across the tracks. The Shermans are starting to close in on that final Stug, so it's time to see what it can do. And unfortunately, that is not going to be a whole lot, as it takes 1 shell with a partial penetration right into the front. Doesn't spot what shot it, but it does turn its frontal armor towards it, which does bounce the second shell that comes in on it, so it's been hit twice now. Still no return fire. It gets hit a 3rd time with another penetration and loses a crew member before finally firing a shot back, and looks like it blows up the ammo in the Sherman that was shooting it. So, not stellar performance on that one. Hey, we're 15 turns in, right at the halfway point of the game. That Stug is damaged, missing a crew member, but is still operational despite taking a couple penetrations. So I'm going to reverse it out of there and hopefully save it to engage again later. You can see the sound contact of a Sherman rapidly advancing towards it that was looking to finish it off. So backing out was probably the right move there. You may have noticed in the last couple turns I had another mortar barrage, the remainder of my mortar ammo coming down on the buildings around the road junction, trying to kill the infantry that moved in to secure it. But now the American forces are starting to push across the open, and those Shermans are putting massive amounts of machine gun and cannon fire into every building they can see, primarily into the outer buildings on the objective, which was exposed to fire as I expected, so I don't have a whole lot of troops in there, but either way, he's going to put a lot of fire into me for the next couple turns. With all the incoming fire on those outer buildings, it's time to start moving some troops that were in there out. So you can see in the middle, I'm starting to move them back into more protected positions, so they're not quite as exposed to enemy fire. For now, it's mostly just going to be a waiting game. I hope his Shermans expend some of their ammunition and HE shells into some now empty buildings and preserve the rest of my force as best I can. But it is going to be a very relentless assault with all of these Shermans coming in, and more buildings are going to start to collapse. And my Stug had moved around the back of the buildings and is trying to get back into position to rejoin the fight, but I did misjudge the height of the walls versus the height of a Sherman, and its turret can just see right over the top, and it's going to put a shot right into the side armor of the Stug, finishing off my 3rd and final piece of armor. I managed to trade 3 Stugs for 2 Shermans, which is horrible. I was really hoping to get more than double that. I was hoping the 3 could get rid of, 5 or 6. So I am in a pretty bad position now, and I only have 1 Panzerschreck left. Well, it looks like the majority of the American push is going to come right up the town access road directly. They've already made it across the tracks into the warehouses in one position, and more infantry are going to start trying to cross the tracks. I do have machine guns that are firing at them, but he proves pretty evasive and manages to get across. And the Shermans are continuing to put fire into all of my buildings. Yeah, the situation is starting to get a little bit dire here, with a Sherman shell knocking out an entire MG42 team in one shot, and American infantry starting to get into the buildings themselves. Not looking so great for me here, but I still have some troops that I can reposition, and then an American mortar barrage starts coming down. It is not on positions that my troops are in, which is fortunate, so it's not going to do a whole lot of damage, but I have enough troubles without mortars coming down on me right now, that's for sure. Okay, with the main enemy push mostly identified, I've started to move all of my troops from the side positions. I'm going to try and reinforce this little alleyway as best I can, and hopefully kill as much as I can as it tries to get through the town access road there. The mortar rounds are continuing to come down. Some of them are landing a little bit farther out. Looks like some may have actually hit their own troops there, but otherwise, mostly safe on my part. I do take a wound, no casualties to a squad in a building, but otherwise, it's just setting up and getting ready for the main attack to come in. The American objective is to the right of my objective, so they actually need to push farther in than I need to hold. So they're running out of time to get to that objective. One of the Shermans is going to stray into the line of sight of my third and final Panzerschreck, and it's going to land a hit, and hopefully has knocked that tank out. My infantry that were in the one building that the Shermans can all see down the road are getting pummeled quite quickly. So not a very good position to be in, but these buildings along the sides are a little bit safer because the Shermans can't get a good view in them, so they're not able to see the infantry. So that's going to be my main defensive position here, is just hoping that the Shermans are going to have to come forward to clear out the buildings and then get hit by anti-tank weapons. And you can see the enemy infantry that I'm spotting. Each of these squads is only a couple men, so I think I've done quite a bit of damage with the mortars to his very limited pool of infantry. We can see here how effective that position for the Panzerschreck is, as one of the Shermans is trying to suppress them, but it can't really see the building, so it's just shooting its machine gun to the side of the building. More enemy infantry are going to start streaming across the road there, and my infantry in the side buildings are going to start firing back on them. And between the building on the far right that I have the HQ squad running into right now, they start to make spots on a building on the opposite side of the courtyard, now that I believe one of them, one of the other buildings in between collapsed, so they can now see across. They're going to start putting fire into the American squads and start to rack up some casualties. So my last little defensive position here, well, looking like it could possibly be overwhelmed, is actually getting a bunch of kills in, and it is definitely making a match for the enemy infantry, which, again, very limited in number, and I've hopefully killed a fair amount of them, so he doesn't have a lot left. From this angle, you can see that I do have a few squads in the very back row of buildings. There are a lot of the ones that have been firing on the Americans crossing the road. The Shermans are buttoned up, so they haven't been able to spot those infantry. So they are being relatively effective in firing at the American infantry without being retaliated against by the Shermans yet, as the Shermans just haven't been able to see them. But more buildings are going to start to come down, opening up the avenues of attack for the Shermans to get in there and more infantry to start moving up. But the majority of the push is going to have to be from the Shermans, because I don't think he has enough infantry to clear these buildings himself. It's going to have to be the tanks moving up. Some American infantry are going to make it across the right-hand side of the courtyard and start taking positions in the buildings. A little bit of a danger there, because they can flank my building that has the machine gun and two teams and HQ squad in it. But otherwise, that one building that I have there seems to be pretty much out of line of sight of the Shermans, so they've been doing a fantastic job of taking out any infantry that have been moving into the ruined building right across from them. Going in with just 3 turns left now as we're in turn 27. Sherman is going to move into that courtyard where the infantry just moved through. So this is a little bit bigger of a problem because I can't really hold them back as effectively. But more infantry streaming in off the bottom of the screen there. Yeah, going to start trying to move into the courtyard to dislodge me. And we're getting a pretty good picture of the remaining enemy forces here because it looks like he's gathering everything together for one last push to try and get to his objective. I do have that one command squad there right on the town access objective, which is the last one I have that's holding it. And my Panzerschreck finally takes a casualty. One of the guys goes down, but not the guy with the Panzerschreck. So he will still hopefully be able to be effective in his defense, as he's pretty much the only thing I have left that can take out these Shermans that are coming in on me now. Apologies as once again the sound cuts out for this turn. With the Americans pressing in, I've started to evacuate some troops from one of the buildings that is now quickly becoming in danger from the Sherman that went into the courtyard. You can see over at the town access side, a Sherman did roll forward and hit a mine and blow up. So good placement on that mine, it did its job. The HQ squad is going to hook around the side. They have a Panzerfaust, so they're going to try and sneak through the little gate in the wall there and hit that Sherman in the side with the Panzerfaust. The other squad behind them is just going to take up a new position behind the building for now while I find a better spot for them. So the squad gets into position, they see the tank. I don't know who has the Panzerfaust, but I don't see anyone aiming it, and then the Sherman is going to see them and shoot 2 of them. So there goes that plan. Have to come up with another way of getting rid of that Sherman, because that is not going to work. So turn 29, just this turn and 1 more to go. The Americans in a pretty strong position, but they do still have to push up that road in order to capture their objective. And I still do have a Panzerschreck available and a couple infantry squads tucked into the side watching the road. So it won't be particularly easy for them to make that final push, but we'll see if they can do it. And one of the American infantry squads is going to fire a bazooka, which is going to strike a building and kill one of the last troops I had in the squad. And moving into the final turn now, expecting an all-out rush to get to the objective, so I'm moving as many troops as I can to counter that, and here we can see it. One American squad is going to start running away, but the Sherman is going to advance towards the objective, right into the line of sight of that Panzerschreck that is still alive, and hopefully it's going to be able to take the Sherman down. Which it does. And another building is going to collapse, taking out a couple of my scouts. And more Americans that were trying to run onto the objective are going to start fleeing, definitely having morale problems from the amount of infantry losses they've suffered. But they're still going to be trying to push up as much as they can because they need to get on that objective. They have unfortunately pushed me off of my objective, but hopefully I can stop them from getting theirs still. Turn 31, we've gone into overtime, which is something I didn't know could happen in Combat Mission until this game here when we went into overtime. So I guess it's determined, since everything is still heavily contested, we get another turn. So he's going to attempt once again to rush his Shermans onto the objective, with a massive amount of fire going out to try and suppress my troops. But that Panzerschreck, proving himself a true hero, is going to get another shot on target, and he is going to kill another Sherman. So that is his 3rd Sherman that he's knocked out from his little corner of the building. And yet another overtime turn, into turn 32 now, as my opponent has not been able to get onto his objective. And unfortunately, I am pushed off of mine as well, and you can see there a devastating tank shell knocks out 5 men of a squad in 1 hit. But take a look at the recon team in the back there as they are sprinting across the open. They're going to be making a long run, desperately hoping that they can get onto my objective to at least contest it. But at this point, I'm not sure he has any infantry left, because all of the infantry that I know of I saw run away. So I think they have broken and started to flee. My troops aren't exactly in the greatest position either. You can see the couple remaining men have broken and cowered, but this recon team is going to make it. The long run, they get to that objective right at the end of the turn. And we do not get a third overtime turn. The game ends at the end of turn 32, resulting in a US Army minor victory. I killed 42 of the Americans, wounded 22 more, and managed to take out 6 of his tanks, taking significant casualties on my own side as well, which I expected. Overall, it was a very difficult game. The game where I played as the Americans was also very difficult. Cargol is a very skilled opponent. He definitely outclassed me on this one for sure, and I struggled in both games to keep up with him, but I think I did a lot better in this German defense game, primarily around the final stand at the end. There is where I made most of my kills. So overall, a good round 2 comes to a close, and we're going to start moving on to round 3 of the Utah Beach tournament. Thanks for watching, everyone. Catch you in the next one.